What do you do when the man who destroyed you sends you an invitation to his new life? When the woman who replaced you wants you to watch her victory? Seraphiel Vance was invisible, broken, and forgotten. Her ex-husband Mark was marrying into a powerful family, and he wanted Seraphiel to be there as his final humiliation. But they made one mistake. They forgot that the quietest person in the room is often the most dangerous. They thought she'd come alone. They never expected her to walk in with the one man they were all desperate to impress. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about power. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, heavy, and smelling faintly of jasmine and Seraphiel Vance thought smugness. It had been delivered by courier to the tiny, struggling art gallery she managed in Soho, the Elysian Gallery. It was an act of aggression disguised as etiquette. She waited until she was back in her fourth-floor walk-up in Greenpoint, the one with the rattling pipes, and the view of a brick wall before she opened it. Her cat, a scruffy tabby named Hopper, wound around her ankles as she slit the seal with a kitchen knife. It was exactly what she knew it would be. Amelia Davenport and Mark Landon. Request the pleasure of your company. At their marriage celebration, Saturday the 14th of November, at the Plaza Hotel, the Grand Ballroom. A smaller, equally thick card was tucked inside. On it, a handwritten note in perfect looping cursive. Seraphiel, I do hope you can make it. It would mean so much to Mark to know you've truly moved on. We're both so happy. Amelia. Seraphiel sank onto her worn velvet armchair, the one she'd bought at a thrift store. The invitation felt like a 20-pound weight in her hands. It wasn't just an invitation, it was a summons, a command performance to witness the final triumph of the two people who had systematically dismantled her life. Mark, her husband of 10 years. The man she had supported, loved, and believed in when he was just an ambitious junior associate at a finance firm. She had worked 2 jobs, then pouring her own small inheritance into his dreams, paying for his tailored suits and hosting dinners for his bosses. She, the art history major, had learned to talk derivatives and market caps. And it had worked. He'd climbed. He'd become successful. And the moment he'd reached the floor he wanted, he'd looked at the woman who had helped him build the ladder and decided she was no longer suitable. Amelia Davenport was suitable. She was the daughter of Harrison Davenport, a real estate mogul with a reputation for crushing his rivals. Amelia was blonde-polished and had never worked a day in her life. She was the prize Mark had been working for. The divorce had been brutal. Mark, using his new connections, had painted Seraphiel as unstable, greedy. She'd been left with almost nothing, her name dragged through the mud of the New York social pages. She had been Seraphiel Landon, the bitter ex-wife. Now, a year later, she was just Seraphiel Vance. Manager of the Elysian, a gallery owned by a kind, elderly man named Arthur who was on the verge of bankruptcy. She was quiet, tired, and, as the invitation implied, forgotten. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend Chloe. "Tell me you didn't get it," Chloe said, skipping hello. "It's impressive," Seraphiel murmured, tracing the gold embossing. "I think the paper is 120-pound stock." "Seraphiel, you are not going. You are going to burn that, perform a small cleansing ritual, and then come over here so I can pour a bottle of overpriced wine into your face." "She wrote me a note, Chloe. She wants me to be there. She wants to see me pathetic and alone. She wants to parade Mark in front of me." "And that's exactly why you're not going. You don't give them the satisfaction. You have a sudden case of the plague. Yes, very contagious." Seraphiel laughed a dry, humorless sound. "It's at the Plaza. The Grand Ballroom. We used to walk by there. Mark always said. He said that's where we'd renew our vows one day." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. "That man," Chloe finally seethed, "is a parasite. And Amelia is the host. Okay, new plan. You are going." "What, Chloe? No. You just said, 'I was wrong. You're not going to hide. You're not going to be the victim. You are going to go and you are going to look so unbelievably shatteringly beautiful that Mark Landon regrets the day he ever learned to breathe. You're going to walk in there, drink their free champagne, and show them you're not broken. And who am I walking in with? Seraphiel asked, the fight draining out of her. Hopper the cat. My $400 a month student loan bill. I can't even afford a new dress, let alone a ticket to... Oh God, it's a seated dinner. She'll probably put me at a table in the kitchen. We'll find you a dress. You'll rent one. And you'll go alone. It's powerful. I don't need a man. It's pathetic, Chloe. That's what they'll see. The poor, lonely ex-wife watching the love of her life marry a younger, richer woman. No, I'm not going. Seraphiel hung up, tossing the invitation onto her cluttered coffee table. It landed face up, the glittering gold script mocking her. She looked around her tiny apartment. The life she was left with. The life Mark and Amelia had deemed appropriate for her. She wasn't going. It was the only power she had left. She would deny them their audience. She picked up the RSVP card. Declines with regret. Her hand trembled as she reached for a pen. But she didn't check the box. She couldn't, because as much as she hated to admit it, some small, broken part of her still couldn't believe it was real. A part of her needed to see it. 3 weeks passed. The RSVP deadline came and went. Seraphiel had done nothing. The invitation sat on her desk at the gallery, a silent, creamy time bomb. Her boss, Arthur, was too kind to ask why she spent her lunch breaks staring at a wall. The Elysian Gallery was Seraphiel's only refuge. It specialized in undiscovered modern impressionists. She loved the smell of the oil paint and the turpentine, the quiet echo of the polished wooden floors. But love didn't pay the rent. Arthur had confided in her that they had 2 months, maybe 3, before they would have to sell to a developer who wanted to turn the building into luxury condos. On a rainy Tuesday, the gallery was empty. The bell over the door chimed, and Seraphiel looked up from her ledger, annoyed at the interruption. A man stood there shaking a fine cashmere umbrella. He wasn't dressed like a typical gallery patron. No flashy watch, no designer suit. He wore dark, perfectly fitted jeans, a simple gray Henley, and a worn dark peacoat. He was tall, with sharp features and hair the color of jet, speckled with a bit of silver at the temples. But it was his eyes that held her. They were a pale, piercing blue, and they scanned the room with an intensity that was almost unnerving. He looked less like an art lover and more like a predator. He moved through the gallery with a silent, confident grace. He didn't browse. He assessed. He stopped in front of their centerpiece, a chaotic, beautiful oil painting by a new artist from Chicago named Francis Vale. It was titled Convergence. "It's derivative," the man said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that cut through the silence. Seraphiel stiffened. "I'm sorry." He didn't turn. "It's derivative. The brushwork is a clumsy attempt to mimic Richter, but the color palette is pure, unadulterated Rothko. The artist is talented, but they're hiding behind their influences. They're afraid." Seraphiel, who had staked the gallery's last dime on Francis Vale, felt a flare of protective anger. She walked over to stand beside him. "You're wrong," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. He finally looked at her. The full force of his gaze was startling. "Am I?" It wasn't a question. "You're right about the influences. Vale is clearly a student of the masters. But it's not mimicry, it's a conversation. Look here." She pointed to a slash of violent crimson hidden in the deep blues. "Richter would never have used that. It's too emotional. And Rothko's colors were about devotion. This is about conflict. It's not derivative. It's synthesis. He's not afraid. He's just getting started." The man stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a solid minute he said nothing. Seraphiel felt her flush of confidence ebb, suddenly aware she had just lectured a wealthy patron. I apologize," she stammered. "Art is subjective, of course." "Don't apologize," he said. It's the first honest thing I've heard in a gallery in a decade. You're passionate, and you're right." He turned back to the painting. "What's the artist's name again?" "Francis Vale." "And the price?" Seraphiel swallowed. $22,000. "I'll take it," he said as if he were ordering a coffee. He pulled out a simple black credit card. The name on it was just J. Thorne. Seraphiel was so stunned she almost dropped the card. "Of course, Mr. Thorne. I'll just wrap this for transport." "Don't. My team will retrieve it. Just process the payment." As she ran the card, her hands shook. The sale went through instantly. This single purchase would keep the gallery open for another 6 months. She handed him the receipt. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. This means a great deal to the artist. And to the gallery. You saved the sale, Ms. Vance. Seraphiel Vance." His eyes flicked from her face to her desk. He saw the invitation. The thick, creamy envelope. His gaze lingered on it for just a second too long. "Vance." He repeated the name, tasting foreign. "You should be in a better gallery, Ms. Vance. This place is a mausoleum." Before she could form a reply, he was gone. The bell chiming his exit. Seraphiel didn't see him again for 2 weeks. The painting was picked up by men in dark suits who were so efficient they were terrifying. Life returned to its new, anxious normal. Then, on a Friday evening, just as she was closing up, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom slid to the curb. It was the kind of car that didn't just park. It docked. The back door opened and Jackson Thorne emerged. This time he was in a suit. It was dark charcoal, custom-tailored, and probably cost more than her apartment. "Ms. Vance," he said, holding the gallery door open for her. "Mr. Thorne, can I help you? The gallery's closed." "I'm not here for the art. I'm here for you. We're going to dinner." It was not a request. Seraphiel was so thrown she just grabbed her coat. I have a proposition for you," he said, guiding her toward the car. The interior smelled of rich leather and quiet, terrifying power. "And I believe it is mutually beneficial." They drove in silence to the grill, a place Seraphiel had only ever read about. The maitre d' practically genuflected as they were shown to a quiet, dark wood booth. Jackson Thorne ordered a 1945 Macallan without looking at the menu. Seraphiel just asked for water. "You're wondering why you're here," he said, steepling his fingers. The thought had crossed my mind. "I am a man who appreciates overlooked assets. That painting you sold me. The artist Francis Vale. I've since acquired his entire collection. My firm is now representing him. You were right. He's brilliant." "That's wonderful, Mr. Thorne." "Call me Jackson. And yes, it is. But I'm not here about Vale. I'm here about that." He nodded as if he could see the invitation still sitting on her desk. The plaza. Mark Landon and Amelia Davenport. Seraphiel's blood ran cold. "I don't know what you mean." "Please, Seraphiel, don't insult my intelligence. My firm, Thorne Industries, has been the target of a rather clumsy acquisition attempt by Harrison Davenport for the last 6 months. I've had a team doing due diligence on him, his family, his new son-in-law." He took a sip of his scotch. "I know exactly who Mark Landon is. And I know who you are, his ex-wife, the one he cheated on and then financially bled dry." Seraphiel felt nailed to the seat. She was exposed, humiliated all over again. "If you're here to gloat or—" "I am here," Jackson interrupted, his voice sharp, "to offer you a deal. I, too, have received an invitation to this wedding. Harrison Davenport is desperate to get me in a room to impress me. He thinks this wedding is his chance." "So, you're going—" "I was not. I despise such gaudy, transparent social maneuvering. But then I met you, and I saw the invitation on your desk." A slow, dangerous smile crossed his face. "You, Seraphiel, are my overlooked asset. You want to walk into that ballroom and see the look on your ex-husband's face. And I want to walk into that ballroom and gut Harrison Davenport's ambition without saying a word. He leaned in. So here's my proposition. You will RSVP, yes, with a +1. And on the night of the wedding, I will be that +1. Seraphiel's immediate reaction was a jolt of pure, undiluted fear. It was followed by a dizzying wave of nausea. Jackson Thorne wasn't just some wealthy art buyer. He was Jackson Thorne. The name echoed in the chambers of New York finance like a thunderclap. He was a corporate raider, a kingmaker, and according to the tabloids, a complete recluse. He bought and sold companies the way other people bought groceries. He was in every sense of the word one of the most powerful men in the world. And he wanted to take her to her ex-husband's wedding. "Why?" she finally managed to whisper. "Why would you do this? It's cruel. You'd be using me to get at Harrison Davenport." Jackson signaled the waiter. "I'll have the steak tartare. She'll have the Dover sole, and a bottle of the '96 Montrachet." He turned back to her, his blue eyes as cold and clear as the ice in his glass. "Of course I'd be using you," he said simply. "And you would be using me. That's the honesty of the transaction. You're not a fool, Seraphiel. Don't pretend to be one. You want to go. You want them to see you. But you're afraid to go alone. You're afraid you'll look like what they've tried to make you, a pathetic, forgotten woman. If you walk in with me, you will be neither." They'll think you've won," he cut in. "They will see you on the arm of a man who could buy and sell Harrison Davenport's entire portfolio before cocktail hour is over. They will see you wearing a dress I will provide and jewels that will make Amelia Davenport's new ring look like a party favor. You will not have to say a single word. Your presence will be a statement." "And what do you get?" she pressed, needing to understand the cost. "Just the satisfaction of ruining their night?" "Don't underestimate the value of satisfaction," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Harrison Davenport believes this wedding, this union of his daughter to an ambitious, amoral man like Landon, solidifies his empire. He believes it will make him respectable. He wants my firm to partner with him on the new Hudson Yards project. He's distasteful, as is your ex-husband. I have no interest in the project, but I've been unable to get him to accept my no. He keeps sending gifts requesting meetings." He leaned forward, his voice dropping. "My presence at his daughter's wedding on the arm of his new son-in-law's ex-wife will be the final definitive no. It will be a public humiliation. It will tell him and the rest of New York that the Davenports are not in my league. It is, as I said, a mutually beneficial arrangement." Seraphiel looked down at her hands. This was a devil's bargain. It was using another person's power for her own petty revenge. It was everything she'd always prided herself on not being. But then she thought of the note. "I do hope you can make it." She thought of the years she'd spent building Mark up only to be tossed aside like trash. She thought of the whispers, the pitying looks, the shame of having to move into a tiny apartment while Mark moved into a Park Avenue penthouse. The part of her that was good and kind was warring with the part of her that was human. "They deserve it," she said so quietly she barely heard herself. "Yes," Jackson agreed. "They do? So do we have a deal, Seraphiel Vance?" She looked up, meeting his intense gaze. She was no longer the frightened gallery manager. She was a woman making a choice. "We have a deal, Jackson Thorne." The next week was a blur. Seraphiel, at Jackson's instruction, RSVP'd. Seraphiel Vance and guest. She imagined Amelia's confusion. Guest. The day before the wedding, a team descended on her apartment. It was not as she'd expected, a single stylist with a rack of rented dresses. It was 3 people. One was a severe-looking woman named Antoine who handled couture. The other 2 were hair and makeup artists who spoke in rapid-fire French. "Mr. Thorne has been specific," Antoine said, her eyes scanning Seraphiel's apartment with distaste. "You are not to be a princess. You are to be a queen. There is a difference." They didn't ask her what she liked. They brought one dress. It was in a sealed black garment bag. When Antoine unzipped it, Seraphiel gasped. It was not a revenge dress. It wasn't black or red or revealing. It was a deep, breathtaking emerald green. It was made of a heavy silk that seemed to drink the light in the room. The cut was masterful long sleeves, a high elegant neckline, and a back that plunged to the precise tasteful base of her spine. It was a custom Oscar de la Renta, so new it hadn't even been photographed yet. "The color," Seraphil whispered. "Is for new beginnings," Antoine said. "And for envy. Now the jewels." A man in a simple black suit who had been standing silently by the door stepped forward with a steel briefcase. He opened it. Seraphil felt faint. Resting on black velvet was a necklace. It wasn't a delicate chain. It was a river of diamonds punctuated by 3 massive cushion-cut Colombian emeralds. The center stone was the size of a robin's egg. Matching earrings lay beside it. "The Céline Parure," Antoine said, her voice hushed with reverence. "From Mr. Thorne's private collection. It belonged to his grandmother." Seraphil touched the center stone. It was cold. I can't wear this," she said, pulling her hand back. This is priceless. What if I lose it?" "You will not," Antoine said, "because Mr. Thorne's personal security will be with you all evening. 2 men. They will look like guests, but they will be watching the necklace." The reality of what she was doing hit Seraphil with the force of a physical blow. She was being draped in millions of dollars, given armed guards, and sent as a strategic weapon into a war she never wanted to be a part of. I need a minute," Seraphil said, backing into her small bathroom. She looked at her own reflection. The tired eyes, the faint lines of stress. This was madness. She called Chloe. "He's sending armed guards, Chloe. For the necklace. It was his grandmother's." "Good." Chloe's voice crackled. "It shows he's serious. Seraphil, this is it. This is the moment from every movie we've ever loved. You are Cinderella, except instead of a prince, you got a cynical, terrifyingly hot billionaire. It's better. Now you put on that dress, you let them put on the diamonds, and you go and burn that ballroom to the ground. Metaphorically. Do not damage the necklace." Seraphil took a deep breath. She looked at her pale, normal face one last time. "Okay," she said. "I'm doing it." She walked out of the bathroom. "All right, Antoine. Let's get to work." The next 2 hours were not about making Seraphil beautiful. They were about revealing the woman who had been buried for years under layers of grief and self-doubt. The hair and makeup artists, Jean-Pierre and Luc, worked with the silent, focused intensity of Renaissance painters. They didn't cake her face in makeup. They evened her skin until it looked like porcelain. They brought out her high cheekbones with a subtle contour. They gave her a smoky slate-gray eye that made her own green eyes look sharper, more intelligent. Her hair was swept up into a complex, elegant chignon at the nape of her neck, leaving her long, graceful neck bare for the necklace. When they were finished, Antoine stepped forward with the dress. It slid on like water, the silk cool against her skin. It fit as if it had been sewn directly onto her body. "Now," Antoine said, opening the steel case. Seraphil stood perfectly still as the cold, heavy weight of the Céline necklace was clasped around her neck. The earrings were clicked into place. They were heavy, a physical reminder of the power she was borrowing. Antoine stepped back and handed Seraphil a floor-length mirror she had brought. Seraphil looked. The woman in the mirror was not Seraphil Vance. Not the gallery manager. Not Mark's pathetic ex-wife. The woman in the mirror was magnificent. She was regal. The emerald green of the dress and the impossible deep green of the jewels made her glow. She looked powerful. She looked expensive. But more than that, she looked unbreakable. "It is time," Antoine said, a rare glimmer of approval in her eyes. A black Mercedes Maybach was waiting downstairs. Not a flashy limo, but the subdued 6-figure chariot of the truly wealthy. The driver opened the door and Seraphil slid in. Jackson Thorne was waiting for her inside. He, too, was in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He looked at her, and for the first time his cool, analytical gaze warmed. He didn't just look. He appreciated. Seraphiel, he said. His voice was a low hum of approval. You are correct. He didn't say beautiful or stunning. He said correct. For the part she was about to play, it was the perfect compliment. He handed her a champagne flute. For courage. As she said, she saw two other black cars, identical sedans, fall in line behind them as they pulled away from the curb. Her security detail. Are you nervous? He asked. I feel like I'm going to be sick, she admitted. Good. Nerves keep you sharp. Remember the plan. We arrive. We are seen. We do not engage in any arguments. You are above them. When Amelia or Mark approaches you, you are polite, you are brief, and you are cold. You smile, you congratulate them, and you move on. Your victory is not in what you say. It's in the fact that you are with me. Let me handle Harrison Davenport. And Mark? Mark. Jackson said, his voice flat, is irrelevant. He is merely the price of admission. He has no power. The power in that room belongs to his new father-in-law. And tonight I'm going to take that power away from him. Just by being there with me. Oh no, Jackson said, taking a sip of his champagne. By being there with you, I create the wound. But I have a little surprise for Mr. Davenport. A wedding gift, if you will, that I will deliver at the appropriate moment. The car slowed, turning onto Central Park South. The glittering lights of the Plaza Hotel loomed in front of them. Showtime, Jackson said. He placed his hand lightly on the small of her back. His touch was firm, possessive, and surprisingly warm. Head high, Seraphiel. You are not his ex-wife tonight. You are my guest. The plaza was a fortress of social anxiety. Paparazzi and society bloggers were camped out by the 58th Street entrance, their flashes popping as minor celebrities and old money families made their way in. The Maybach didn't go to the main entrance. It glided past to a private, discreet side entrance reserved for royalty and heads of state. A hotel manager who looked pale and stressed was waiting for them. Mr. Thorne, welcome. We have you entering through the private corridor. Thank you, Michael, Jackson said, stepping out and extending a hand to Seraphiel. She took it. Her hand was trembling. He gave it a firm, brief squeeze. I'm here. They bypassed the main receiving line where Seraphiel knew Amelia and Mark would be standing, forcing smiles. Instead, they were escorted through a service hallway past a silent, velvet-roped checkpoint and directly to the main doors of the grand ballroom. Ready, Jackson murmured. Seraphiel nodded, her throat too dry to speak. The hotel manager signaled two waiters who pulled the towering gilded doors open, and they walked in. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The grand ballroom, which had been buzzing with the sound of a string quartet and the chatter of 300 of New York's elite, fell silent. It wasn't a gradual hushing. It was as if someone had pulled a vacuum. The whoosh of silence was deafening. The only sound was the string quartet, which after a moment of stunned dissonance faltered and stopped mid-sonata. Every single head turned. They saw Seraphiel first. A vision in emerald green dripping with diamonds that flashed and glittered in the light of the chandeliers. A woman no one recognized but who was so obviously, painfully important. Then they saw the man on whose arm she was resting, and the whispers started. Oh my God, is that? It can't be. That's Jackson Thorne. Mark Landon and Amelia Davenport were standing by the towering 12-foot-tall wedding cake, laughing with a city councilman. Seraphiel saw Mark first. He was in a Tom Ford tux, his hair perfectly coiffed. He looked handsome, successful, and happy. A pang of the old familiar pain shot through her. Then he saw her. His smile didn't just fade. It collapsed. The champagne flute in his hand tilted, spilling Taittinger all over his polished shoe. He didn't even notice. He stared at Seraphiel as if he'd seen a ghost. His eyes, wide with disbelief, flicked from her face to the impossible necklace, and then to the man beside her. Mark Landon's face went from shocked to confused to utterly, terrifyingly pale. He knew who Jackson Thorne was. Everyone in finance did. Beside him, Amelia, who had been watching her new husband, turned to see what he was looking at. Her perfectly glossed lips parted in a silent "oh." The jealousy was immediate and visceral. It was an ugly, contorting thing. She saw the dress. She saw the necklace. She knew instantly that those were not rentals. She knew they were worth more than her entire wedding. Who is that?" she hissed at Mark. "That," Mark whispered, his voice strangled, "is Jackson Thorne." What is she doing with Jackson Thorne?" But the worst reaction came from Amelia's father. Harrison Davenport, a beefy man with a face perpetually red from expensive wine and exertion, was holding court by the bar. When he saw Jackson Thorne, his eyes nearly bulged out of his head. A massive, wolfish grin split his face. "He's here," he boomed, clapping a fellow real estate developer on the back. "He's here. I told you a man like Thorne can't resist an opportunity. He's here for the deal." He began to bulldog his way through the crowd. His hand outstretched, a sycophantic smile plastered on his face. He hadn't even looked at the woman on Thorne's arm. He didn't care. "Here we go," Jackson murmured to Serafiel. He kept his hand on her back, guiding her forward into the center of the room as if they owned it. "Smile, Serafiel. They're all watching you." She lifted her chin. She was no longer Serafiel. She was a queen. She smiled a small, polite, devastatingly cool smile as Harrison Davenport barreled toward them. "Mr. Thorne Jackson. What an honor." Harrison bellowed, grabbing Jackson's hand and pumping it. "I am so glad you could make it. This is a glorious day, my daughter, Amelia." He finally turned, expecting to brush aside Jackson's date. He looked at Serafiel. His eyes narrowed. He knew her. He'd seen her at the divorce proceedings. The mousy crying woman his lawyers had torn apart. His smile faltered. What is this?" Jackson extracted his hand from Harrison's grip. He gave Serafiel a look of pure adoration, a look that was entirely for the audience. "Harrison," Jackson said, his voice cutting through the nearby whispers. "A lovely party. You know my companion, of course, Ms. Serafiel Vance." Serafiel met Harrison's gaze. "Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice clear and cool. "Congratulations on your daughter's marriage." The implications hung in the air, thick and toxic. Jackson Thorne had not come as a guest of the Davenports. He had come as the guest of the ex-wife. Harrison Davenport's red face went a mottled, sickly purple. He finally understood. This was not an acceptance. This was a declaration of war. The spell was broken. The music stuttered back to life. But the atmosphere of the wedding was irrevocably changed. The air was charged with tension. Serafiel and Jackson were the new center of gravity. People didn't just look, they stared. A small, brave circle of guests, sensing the shift in power, began to drift toward them, eager to be introduced to Jackson Thorne. "Jackson." A woman in a Chanel suit breathed, "I haven't seen you out in ages." "And who is this vision?" "This is Serafiel Vance," Jackson said, his hand never leaving her back. "Serafiel is a brilliant art curator. She's been advising me on my new acquisitions." He was giving her a new identity, a new story right in front of them. She wasn't an ex-wife. She was a brilliant in-demand expert. Serafiel found herself discussing the merits of the new Francis Vale exhibit with a senator and his wife, the words coming easily, confidently. She was, after all, just talking about art. From across the room, she watched her old life collide with her new one. Amelia, her face a mask of rage, was in a furious, whispered argument with Mark. She was jabbing her finger toward Serafiel. Mark just kept shaking his head, running his hands through his hair, his expensive tuxedo now looking rumpled and cheap. He looked trapped. Finally, Amelia could take it no more. She marched over her beaded white gown, hissing across the floor. "Serafiel," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Amelia." "What a beautiful dress," Serafiel replied, her voice calm. "Thank you. I'm so glad you could come. But I must say I'm confused. I had no idea you and Mr. Thorne were acquainted. He was my father's guest." It was a pathetic, desperate lie, and everyone who heard it knew it. "Oh, I don't think so," Seraphiel said, taking a sip of the champagne a waiter had handed her. "Jackson and I have been collaborating for some time. He was kind enough to escort me tonight." "Collaborating?" Amelia repeated, her eyes narrowing on the necklace. "Is that what you call it? That's quite a collaboration you're wearing. You should be careful, Seraphiel. Men like Mr. Thorne, they rent, they don't buy." The insult was sharp, public, and designed to cut. Seraphiel felt the old sting of shame. But before she could reply, Jackson, who had been speaking to the senator, turned. He hadn't raised his voice, but his sudden cold attention made Amelia flinch. "Mrs. Landon," he said, the name Landon sounding like an insult. "Are you implying that Miss Vance is for sale?" Amelia paled. I simply meant, because I assure you she is not. This necklace," he said lightly, touching the center emerald, "was a gift to my grandmother. I lend it only to people I hold in the highest possible esteem." He looked from Seraphiel to Amelia, and his gaze was like frost. "Your father, on the other hand, has been trying to sell himself to me for 6 months. It's unbecoming." Amelia looked as if she'd been slapped. She turned and fled, disappearing into the crowd. Seraphiel was shaking, but Jackson's hand was firm on her back. "You did perfectly." A moment later, Mark appeared, his face slick with sweat. "Seraphiel, I need to talk to you. Alone." "I don't think we have anything to talk about, Mark," she said. "Please. What is this? Are you with him? Are you trying to ruin me? You know who he is. You're playing with fire." "Seraphiel, you don't—" "Mark," Seraphiel said, and for the first time she felt nothing but pity for him. "It's your wedding day. You should go and be with your wife." "My wife?" He scoffed, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. This is a deal, Seraphiel. This is my one shot. Davenport promised me a senior partnership. He promised me, and it all hinges on Thorne. If you've screwed this up for me—" "If I've screwed this up?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "You made this choice, Mark. You chose this. You chose her. You told me I was a weight, that I didn't fit into your new life. Well, look at me. Am I fitting in now?" He stared at her, the realization dawning on him. The woman he'd thrown away was standing in the center of his wedding, being feted by people who wouldn't have given him the time of day, all on the arm of a man he could only dream of meeting. "Seraphiel," he began, his voice pleading. "Mr. Landon." Jackson's voice cut in. "I believe your father-in-law is looking for you. He seems distressed." Harrison Davenport was in fact storming toward them, his face purple. "Thorne!" he yelled loud enough for the music to seem to quiet. "I don't know what game you're playing, but you are embarrassing my daughter. You're embarrassing me." "I am playing no game, Harrison," Jackson said coolly. "You came here with her, this nobody. You did it to insult me, to back me into a corner on the Helios project. Well, it won't work, Jackson." Thorne smiled. It was not a nice smile. "That's where you're wrong, Harrison. I didn't come here to back you into a corner. I came here to give you my answer." "Your answer?" "Yes, it's no. I'm not partnering with you on the Helios project. I'm not partnering with you on anything. Ever." You can't," Davenport spluttered. "That project it's solid. Your numbers are inflated, and your projections are based on zoning changes that will never be approved. Which brings me to my wedding gift." Jackson reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a simple white envelope. He handed it to Harrison Davenport. Davenport ripped it open. It was a single sheet of paper. He read it. All the color drained from his face. He staggered back, grabbing onto a waiter's tray to steady himself. What is this?" he whispered. "That," Jackson said, "is a press release. It's slated to go out to the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg first thing Monday morning. It's from my office. It announces that after a thorough review, Thorne Industries has found significant and troubling financial irregularities in the Davenport portfolio. It strongly advises all of our partners to divest from any projects associated with your name. You wouldn't, Harrison breathed, but he was looking at a death sentence. That's a lie. It's slander. Is it? Jackson asked. My forensic accountants are the best in the world. They found it all, Harrison. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the bribes to the city council. You're not a mogul. You're a con artist. And you're over-leveraged. This press release, it won't just kill the Helios project. It will trigger a run on your credit. You'll be bankrupt by Christmas. Mark Landon, who had been listening, looked like he was going to be physically ill. He had just married into a family that was about to be destroyed. He was about to be destroyed. But, Harrison said, his mind racing, but why? I'll walk away. I'll never bother you again. Jackson's gaze was ice. Because, he said, his voice soft but carrying, I do not as a rule do business with men who build their empires on deceit. And more personally, I do not like men who raise their children to be cruel. He nodded briefly toward where Amelia was now standing, watching her face a mask of horror. He then turned to Seraphiel. Seraphiel, I believe we've seen enough. Shall we? He offered her his arm. Seraphiel looked at the ruins of the three people who had ruined her. Harrison broken. Mark a hollow shell. Amelia crying, her mascara running. She felt no joy, no triumph. She just felt done. She placed her hand on Jackson's arm. Yes, she said. Let's go. They turned. The entire room silent parted for them. They walked out of the grand ballroom not as a broken ex-wife and a billionaire, but as the only two people in the room who truly had all the power. The ride back in the Maybach was encased in a profound, heavy silence. The city lights of Manhattan blurred past the tinted windows, a river of fractured diamonds that for the first time Seraphiel felt no connection to. She was suspended in an unreal bubble of rich leather, expensive scotch, and the silent, potent presence of the man beside her. She was staring at her own reflection in the glass. The woman looking back was a stranger draped in a king's ransom. She had walked into that ballroom as a ghost, an afterthought to another woman's triumph. She had walked out as, what? A weapon. A co-conspirator. The victor. The victory felt cold. She had watched the complete and utter dismantling of three people. There was no joy in it. No triumphant swell of music. There was only the clinical quiet finality of a predator ending its hunt. She had been for one night allied with that predator. In the quiet she finally began to cry. It was not the gut-wrenching howling grief she had endured when Mark left. It was not the desperate, lonely sobs she had stifled in her tiny apartment. This was a silent, hot, steady stream of tears. It was a pressure valve releasing everything. The shame, the anger, the years of feeling invisible, and the shocking, terrifying vertigo of the night's power. It all flowed out of her, leaving her feeling scoured clean and utterly exhausted. Jackson didn't say a word. He didn't pat her hand, offer a platitude, or ask if she was all right. He simply, without looking at her, reached into an interior compartment and handed her a folded, heavy silk pocket square. It smelled faintly of his cologne, something clean like bergamot and cedar. She pressed it to her eyes, the material impossibly soft, and composed herself. When she was done, she folded it neatly and held it in her lap. The car, which had been a glittering chariot, slowed as it pulled up to her fourth-floor walk-up in Greenpoint. The contrast was brutal. The crumbling stoop, the flickering streetlight, the faint smell of garbage from the corner. It was as if the fairy tale had not just ended, but shattered on the pavement. The two black security sedans slid in silently behind them, boxing them in. The spell was broken. I should give you back the necklace, she said, her voice husky. Her fingers fumbled for the clasp at her nape, but they were trembling. The necklace was heavy, a beautiful cold weight, a costume. "Leave it," Jackson said, his voice quiet but firm. "My head of security will retrieve it from you inside. It's not proper to remove it on the street." He exited the car and walked around to open her door, his movements economical and precise. A tall man in a dark suit, Mr. Harris, had already exited the lead car and stood impassively by the building's entrance. Jackson walked her to the chipped front door. The air was cold and it bit at her bare shoulders. This was it. The transaction was complete. "Well," she said, trying to find the words. "Thank you, Jackson, for everything. You kept your end of the bargain. It was more than I could have imagined." A cold, hollow finality settled in her chest. The Maybach would drive away, Mr. Harris would take the jewels, and she would be Seraphil Vance again, just one with a very strange, unbelievable story to tell. She was Cinderella, and the clock had just struck midnight. "Good night, Jackson." She turned the key in the lock, but his voice stopped her. "Seraphil." She turned back. He was standing under the weak yellow porch light, a tall, dark silhouette. "I have one more piece of business," he said. "It concerns the Elysian Gallery." Her heart, which had just begun to beat, normally plummeted. "Arthur, is he okay? What happened? Did the developer—" "I bought it," he said. The words didn't compute. "You— what?" "I bought the building. This afternoon. The holding company that owned it was on the verge of bankruptcy. I acquired their portfolio." Seraphil stared at him in horror, the tears she'd just staunched threatening to return. This felt like a new, unimagined cruelty. "You bought it, why to gut it, to turn it into condos? Was this all just some elaborate, cruel game to show me you could take that from me too?" Jackson watched her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. He let her accusations hang in the air for a beat. "I am not Mark Landon Seraphil," he said, his voice sharp. "I do not destroy things I value. Arthur was 2 weeks from foreclosure. The developer's offer was insulting. My offer was generous. He's on a plane to Palm Beach as we speak." "But then why—" "I told you," he said, "when we first met. I am a man who appreciates overlooked assets. The gallery under its current management was failing, but the curator—" He took a step closer. "The curator has the best eye in New York. I don't just invest in companies, I invest in people. You saw value in Francis Vale when no one else did. That is a rare and very profitable skill." He reached into his tuxedo jacket and handed her a new envelope. This one was simple, professional, heavy cream stock. Her name was typed on the front. She opened it. It was a contract. "This is an offer of employment," he said. "I am dissolving my current art acquisition division. It's lackluster. I am building a new flagship gallery in Chelsea, 10,000 square feet in the new Gary building. It will be called the Thorn Gallery. I need someone to run it, someone with passion, someone who isn't afraid to tell me I'm wrong." Seraphil's eyes scanned the pages. She saw phrases like chief curator, unlimited acquisitions budget, and then a salary. It wasn't just a number, it was a statement. It was a life-altering, world-changing figure. "This is—" she whispered, "this is a rescue." "No," Jackson said immediately, and his voice was hard. "It is not. I am not a Prince Seraphil. I do not believe in fairy tales, and I do not rescue damsels. I am a businessman. This is a high-yield investment. You are an asset. I'd be a fool to let you go." He gestured to her crumbling apartment building, then back to the contract. "You can stay here in the life they left you with, or you can come and build an empire. Not for me. With me." He wasn't offering her a fantasy. He was offering her work. Hard, brilliant, meaningful work. He was offering her a weapon not to fight her old life, but to build a new one. Seraphil looked at the contract, a key to a world she'd never even known how to dream of. Then she looked at Jackson Thorne. He was dangerous. He was cold, and he was the most honest person she had ever met. A smile, a real genuine powerful smile, spread across her face. It reached her eyes, which were still bright from her tears. She folded the contract and handed it back to him. He raised an eyebrow, his one sign of surprise. "I'll have my lawyer look this over," she said, her voice now firm. "And I have one condition." "Go on." "The salary is fine. The budget is generous. But I want a discretionary fund for artists like Francis Vale, the ones no one sees yet, the ones I find, and it answers only to me." A flicker of something approval amusement danced in his cold eyes. He took the contract. "You'll have a counteroffer on your desk by Monday," he said. "Good," she replied. She turned, unlocked her door, and paused. "Mr. Harris," she called, "you can come up. I'll have the necklace in its box." She looked back at Jackson Thorne one last time. "Monday, then, 8 a.m. 7:30, she said. "I like to be early." She walked into her building, leaving the door open for the security man, and did not look back. The clock hadn't struck midnight. The sun was just beginning to rise. Sarah Fields' story isn't about getting revenge. It's about finding your own value when everyone else has written you off. They thought she was a postscript to her ex-husband's story, but she was just the beginning of her own. She didn't need a prince to save her. She just needed an opportunity to become the queen she always was. Sometimes the best happily ever after isn't a kiss. It's a contract. What did you think of Sarah Fields' story? Have you ever felt underestimated? Let us know in the comments below. Your story could be the one we tell next. Thank you for watching. If you love this story of an incredible comeback, please hit that like button so we know to make more. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own power. And most importantly, click subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another story.
The whiskey glass felt cool and heavy in Adam's hand, a solid anchor in a world spinning out of his control. Across the marble expanse of his penthouse living room stood his pregnant wife, Lily, her eyes blazing with a courage he'd long tried to extinguish. Beside him, his mistress, Maya, watched with the cool, predatory stillness of a panther. Adam, a man who bought and sold companies before breakfast, was used to winning. But in that moment, faced with the wreckage of his own making, he chose not to argue, but to shatter. And someone was recording. Before we begin, take a moment and comment your city below. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from around the world. Now, let's dive in. Adam Whitaker wasn't just wealthy. He was a force of nature. At 36, he had built a private equity empire on a foundation of ruthless takeovers and sheer, indomitable will. He treated the world as his personal chessboard, and people were merely pawns. His wife, Lily, had once been his queen. Now, 7 months pregnant with their first child, she felt like a captured piece, confined to a corner of the board. "I don't understand why you had to be here tonight, Maya," Lily said, her voice trembling but firm. She stood by the grand piano, one hand resting protectively on the swell of her belly. She was a picture of exhausted elegance in a simple cream-colored cashmere dress, her red hair a fiery contrast to her pale, strained face. She had come home from a prenatal yoga class to find her husband and his business associate sharing a bottle of Macallan 25. Maya Kerr, perched elegantly on the edge of the white leather sofa, didn't flinch. She was everything Lily was not. Sleek, dark-haired, and radiating a polished ambition that bordered on predatory. As Adam's lead legal counsel, she had become an indispensable part of his professional life, a fact she had leveraged to expertly infiltrate his personal one. "We're closing the Holloway deal tomorrow, Lily," Maya said, her voice smooth as silk. "There were last-minute details. Adam needed me." The emphasis on the word needed was a deliberate, perfectly aimed dart. "He needs his wife," Lily shot back, her gaze shifting to Adam, who had remained silent, watching them from his armchair like a spectator at a blood sport he'd orchestrated. "He needs to be home with his family." Not this. Adam finally stirred, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass. Lily, don't be dramatic. It's business. His voice was low, laced with that familiar, patronizing calm that always preceded a storm. It was the tone he used when he was about to remind her, subtly or not, of how everything she had, the penthouse, the designer clothes, the comfortable life, was because of him. It was the tone that made her feel small, irrational, and ungrateful. "This stopped being about business a long time ago, Adam, and you know it," Lily said, taking a brave step forward. "She's in our home, at all hours. She's on our vacations. I see the way you look at her. I see the way she looks at you. Do you think I'm a fool?" The air crackled. This was new territory. Lily had always swallowed her concerns, burying her suspicions under a veneer of wifely duty. But the pregnancy had changed her. It had unearthed a primal protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the life inside her. Adam's jaw tightened. He despised being challenged, especially in his own domain. He looked from Lily's defiant, tear-streaked face to Maya's coolly observant one. Maya's expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Triumph? Anticipation? He couldn't tell. This escalating confrontation was a direct threat to the careful compartmentalization of his life. He had his beautiful, respectable wife for his public image and future legacy, and his brilliant, sharp-edged mistress for intellectual stimulation and thrill. He believed he was entitled to both. "You're being hysterical," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're pregnant. Your hormones are making you paranoid." It was his go-to weapon. Her emotions, her pregnancy, anything to invalidate her perception of reality. Gaslighting was a tool he wielded with surgical precision, but this time it didn't work. "Don't you dare," Lily whispered, her voice cracking with pain and fury. "Don't you dare use our child as an excuse for your betrayal. I am not hysterical. I am not paranoid. I am your wife, and I am telling you, to your face, that I know what you are doing." She took another step, her eyes locking onto his. "You have to choose, Adam. Her or me. You have to tell her to leave, now." It was an ultimatum, a direct challenge to his authority. And Adam Whitaker did not respond well to ultimatums. He felt a surge of white-hot rage, so intense it was dizzying. All the pressure of the Holloway deal, the audacity of Lily's defiance, the silent judgment he imagined in Maya's eyes, it all converged into a single, explosive point. He stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. "You don't give me ultimatums, Lily," he snarled, his face a mask of fury. "Not in my own home. This is my home too, and I will not have my child brought into a house with—" She couldn't finish the sentence. A sob escaped her lips. That sound of her weakness, her tears, her defiance, was the final trigger. In a single fluid motion born of pure, unadulterated rage, he drew back his arm and threw the heavy whiskey glass. It wasn't aimed at her, not directly. It was a gesture of dominance, an explosion of frustration meant to silence her, to put her back in her place. But he misjudged the distance, the angle, his own strength. The glass flew across the room and shattered against the wall, just inches from Lily's head. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Lily screamed. A raw, terrified sound, stumbling backward and shielding her face with her arms. A shard of glass sliced across her forearm, and a thin line of red bloomed on her skin. She stared at him, her eyes wide with a horror that went beyond the betrayal. This was a new kind of fear, a physical fear of the man she had married. Adam froze, the red mist of his rage slowly receding, replaced by a cold, stomach-churning shock. He looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the dark splash of whiskey on the pristine white wall, the blood on his pregnant wife's arm, and then he looked at Maya. She was still sitting on the sofa, her posture unchanged. But she was no longer looking at him or at Lily. Her gaze was directed downward, at the phone she held, almost completely concealed, in her lap. A tiny red dot glowed on its screen. She had been recording the entire thing. The silence that followed the shattering of the glass was a living, breathing monster. It was filled with the phantom echo of the crash, Lily's ragged, terrified breaths, and the frantic pounding of Adam's own heart. His mind, usually a high-speed processor of complex data, had blue-screened. "Lily, He started, the words turning to ash in his mouth. What could he possibly say? I didn't mean it? I'm sorry? The platitudes were obscene in the face of what he'd just done. Lily didn't respond. She was still pressed against the wall, her eyes locked on the spray of shattered crystal on the floor, as if it were a venomous snake. The cut on her forearm was beading with blood, a stark crimson against her pale skin. The sight of it, of her blood, shed by his hand, sent a jolt of ice through his veins. It was Maya who broke the spell. She rose from the sofa with a chilling, almost unnerving calm. She moved past Adam without a glance and walked over to Lily. "Let me see your arm," Maya said, her voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't gentle or comforting. It was the practical, detached tone of a lawyer assessing damages. Lily flinched away from her touch, her body recoiling as if from a hot flame. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her gaze lifting from the floor to stare at Maya with a look of pure loathing. In that moment, she understood. Maya wasn't just a party to the betrayal. She was a catalyst. She had sat there, a silent provocateur, watching the drama unfold, her very presence a poison in the room. Adam's brain finally rebooted, his survival instincts kicking into high gear. The initial shock was rapidly being replaced by a frantic, self-preservationist panic. A witness, a pregnant wife, an act of violence. This was not a marital spat. This was a potential crime scene. This was a career-ending, reputation-destroying catastrophe. "Maya, get the first aid kit from the master bathroom," he commanded, his voice regaining its familiar tone of authority. He needed to take control, to manage the situation, to clean up the mess, both literal and figurative. He took a cautious step toward Lily. "Liv, let me help you. We need to clean that cut." "Get away from me," she said, her voice finding a sliver of strength. She pushed herself off the wall and began backing away from him, her eyes wide with a fear he had never seen before. It was the fear of an animal cornered by a predator. He had crossed a line, and they both knew it. The power imbalance had always been there, financial, emotional, but it had just escalated into the physical. He had shattered not just a glass, but the fundamental trust that she was safe with him. Maya returned with the first aid kit and a damp cloth. She handed them to Adam, her eyes meeting his for a fraction of a second. Her expression was a blank slate, but he could feel the shift in the air between them. The dynamic had changed. She had something on him now, a piece of leverage more potent than any legal clause. The image of her phone, of that small red light, was seared into his brain. "Lily, please," Adam said, his voice softer now, pleading. "Just let me look at it. For the baby. If you get an infection..." The mention of the baby was a calculated move, and it worked. Lily stopped backing away, her gaze dropping to her own belly. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by a wave of vulnerability. He approached her slowly, as one would a frightened deer. He gently took her arm, his touch clinical, as he wiped away the blood and examined the cut. It was shallow, but it was ugly. A permanent reminder etched into her skin. As he applied an antiseptic wipe, she winced but didn't pull away. They stood there in a horrifying tableau of domestic triage, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and betrayal. "We'll say you dropped a glass," Adam said, his voice low and urgent, already constructing the narrative. "You were startled. It slipped. and a piece cut you when you tried to clean it up. A simple accident." Lily stared at him, her expression numb. She didn't agree or disagree. She was in shock, her mind struggling to process the chasm that had just opened up in her life. "Maya was just leaving," Adam continued, casting a pointed look at her. "She was just dropping off the final papers for the Holloway deal." He was building the alibi, brick by pathetic brick. Maya nodded, picking up her briefcase. "Yes, I was just on my way out." She walked toward the private elevator, her heels clicking ominously on the marble floor. She paused at the door, her back to them. "I hope you feel better, Lily," she said, without a trace of sincerity. Then, to Adam, "I'll email you the final version of the press release for the morning. You'll want to review it. The message was clear. Business as usual. We have a deal to close. Don't let this unpleasantness derail it. And underneath that, an unspoken threat. I have the recording. Remember that." The elevator doors slid shut, leaving Adam and Lily alone in the vast, silent penthouse. The illusion of normalcy Maya had tried to project was obscene. Adam finished bandaging Lily's arm, his hands clumsy. "I'm going to my old room," Lily said, her voice flat and hollow. She pulled her arm back and walked away from him, toward the guest wing of the penthouse, the one she had occupied before they were married. She didn't look back. Adam was left standing alone in the middle of the living room. He stared at the dark stain on the wall, the bandage on his wife's arm, and the ghost of the red light on Maya's phone. He was a master of hostile takeovers, of finding an opponent's weakness and exploiting it for maximum gain. But now, he was the one who was vulnerable. He had two opponents: a terrified wife who now saw him as a monster, and a calculating mistress who held the evidence of his monstrosity in the palm of her hand. The cleanup was just beginning. Lily didn't sleep. She lay in the sterile silence of the guest room, every nerve ending frayed. The bed felt foreign, the sheets cold. This room, once a symbol of her independent life before Adam, was now her sanctuary and her prison. Every creak of the penthouse, every distant siren from the city below, sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her. She kept replaying the scene in her head, the glint of the glass as it left his hand, the explosion of sound, the searing pain in her arm. But it was the look in his eyes that haunted her most, the blank, unseeing rage. It was the face of a stranger. Sometime before dawn, she heard the soft chime of the private elevator. Adam leaving for the office, for the Holloway deal. As if nothing had happened. The casualness of it, the seamless transition back to his world of power and money, was more chilling than the act itself. For him, last night was an aberration to be managed, a PR problem to be contained. For her, it was the end of a world. A quiet resolve began to form in the pit of her stomach. She couldn't stay here. This place wasn't safe. Her home, her marriage, the man she had promised to love. It was all a lie. She thought of the baby, a tiny, innocent life dependent on her for everything. She had to get out. She moved with a stealth she didn't know she possessed. She packed a small overnight bag with essentials, a change of clothes, her wallet, her prenatal vitamins. She ignored the vast walk-in closet filled with designer clothes he had bought her. They felt like a costume for a role she was no longer playing. As she was about to leave, she paused. On the dresser was her personal tablet. On a whim, she grabbed it and shoved it into her bag. She slipped out of the penthouse through the service elevator, a route she had never used before. The morning air of Austin was cool and damp. She hailed a cab, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange, exhilarating sense of liberation. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she had to go. She told the driver to take her to a hotel on the other side of town, a place he would never think to look for her. Once checked into an anonymous room, she locked the door, leaned against it, and finally let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding all night. She was safe. For now, She pulled out her tablet, intending to look up flights to her sister's in Seattle. But when she connected to the hotel's Wi-Fi, her email client pinged. There was one new message from an anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line was a single word: evidence. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There was no text, only a video file attached. With a sense of dread, she downloaded and played it. The screen filled with the familiar image of her own living room. The angle was low, slightly off-kilter, as if filmed from someone's lap. It was Maya's point of view. She watched the entire argument unfold, her own voice shaking but firm, Adam's escalating anger, his cruel, dismissive words. "You're being hysterical. Your hormones are making you paranoid." And then it happened. She watched in third-person horror as Adam's face contorted with rage. She saw the glass leave his hand, saw herself flinch and scream. The video was clear, the audio pristine. It captured everything. The raw violence of the act, her own terror, the shocking aftermath. The video ended abruptly after the glass shattered. Lily felt sick. Maya had filmed it. The whole time she had been sitting there, not just observing, but documenting. Why? What was her motive? Was it for blackmail? Revenge? Before she could process the implications, her phone, which had been on silent, began to buzz incessantly. A text from her sister, then her mother, then a friend from college. Her sister's text was frantic. "Lily, are you okay? I just saw something on Twitter. Call me now." With a shaking finger, she opened her web browser and typed Adam Whitaker into the search bar. The world exploded. The video was everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, every major news outlet. The headline from a national news blog was stark: "Leaked video appears to show tech mogul Adam Whitaker assaulting pregnant wife." Someone, it had to be Maya, hadn't just sent the video to her. She had released it to the world. It was a tactical nuclear strike against Adam, and Lily was at the center of the blast radius. She clicked on the link. The video was already time-stamped, having been uploaded less than an hour ago. It had millions of views. Millions. The comment section was a raging river of outrage, disgust, and, to her surprise, overwhelming support for her. Justice for Lily was already trending. The power dynamic of the entire situation had just been inverted with the force of a tectonic shift. Adam's wealth, his lawyers, his PR team, they were powerful, but they were nothing against the court of public opinion. He couldn't spin this. He couldn't bury it. Maya had taken his most private, shameful moment and turned it into a global spectacle. Lily sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at her own face on the screen, a reluctant icon of a story that was no longer hers. Her personal trauma had been weaponized and was now public property. She felt a bizarre mix of terror and something else, something she couldn't name. It was the feeling of a cage door being blown off its hinges. Adam had held all the power. He had controlled the narrative, her reality, her life. But Maya, with a single click, had taken that power away from him. In a strange, terrifying way, she had given it to Lily. The video was a violation, but it was also irrefutable proof. Her truth, which he had tried so desperately to deny, was now there for the entire world to see. The storm had broken, and Lily was standing in the eye of it. The Holloway deal was supposed to be Adam Whitaker's magnum opus, a $4.2 billion acquisition that would cement his legacy as one of the most brilliant and ruthless financiers of his generation. The press conference was scheduled for 9 a.m. He had spent the early morning in his office, mainlining coffee and adrenaline, trying to push the events of last night into a locked box in the back of his mind. He had convinced himself he had it under control. Lily would cool down. Maya understood the stakes. It was a blip, an ugly but manageable crisis. At 8:15 a.m., his head of PR, a perpetually stressed woman named Amelia, burst into his office without knocking, her face the color of chalk. She was holding her phone like it was a live grenade. "We need to cancel the press conference," she said, her voice trembling. Adam looked up from the deal summary, annoyed at the intrusion. Don't be ridiculous, Amelia. We're not canceling anything. This is the biggest day in the company's history. You don't understand, she whispered, turning the phone around to show him the screen. This is everywhere. Adam saw the headline first, then the grainy screenshot of his own face, twisted in a mask of rage he didn't recognize, and below it, the video. He snatched the phone from her hand and pressed play. He watched the scene from his own penthouse play out from that sickening, low-angle perspective. He heard his own voice, dripping with condescension and cruelty. He saw Lily's bravery, her fear, and then he saw it, the flash of his arm, the glass arcing through the air. The sound of it shattering was tinny through the phone's small speaker, but it hit him with the force of a physical blow. A cold, primal fear, unlike anything he had ever felt, seized him. This wasn't a rumor. It wasn't an accusation. It was video evidence, undeniable, irrefutable. Maya. It had to be her. The bitch had actually done it. She had torched him. "Kill it!" he snarled, shoving the phone back at Amelia. "Call our legal team. Call the platforms. Use the copyright infringement claim. I want every single copy of that video scrubbed from the internet. Now." "Adam, it's too late," Amelia stammered, her eyes wide with panic. "It has over 10 million views. It's on every news site from CNN to the BBC. Justice for Lily is the #1 trend worldwide. It's over." "It's not over until I say it's over," he roared, sweeping a stack of papers off his desk in a sudden, violent motion. He began pacing his office like a caged tiger, his mind racing, cycling through the 5 stages of grief in a matter of seconds. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and landing squarely back on anger. He had built his entire life, his entire identity, on a foundation of power and control. He controlled markets. He controlled companies. He controlled people. The idea that he had lost control so completely, so publicly, was anathema to his very being. His narcissism couldn't process it. It had to be someone else's fault. It was Lily's for pushing him. It was Maya's for betraying him. It was the world's for daring to judge him. His phone began to ring. It was Grant Holloway, the CEO of the company he was about to acquire. He let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text came through. "Deal is off. Our lawyers will be in touch." The first domino had fallen. Next came the calls from his board members. Their voices, usually so deferential, were now cold and clipped. There was talk of an emergency meeting, of invoking the morality clause in his contract, of asking him to step down as CEO, at least temporarily. The walls of his glass-walled office, which usually made him feel like a king surveying his domain, now felt like the transparent walls of a fishbowl. He could feel the eyes of his employees on him, see them huddled together, whispering, looking at their phones. The power he had cultivated, the fear and respect he commanded, had evaporated in the space of an hour. He retreated into the cold, logical part of his brain, the part that handled crises. He had to formulate a strategy, a public apology, a carefully worded statement. He would say he was under immense stress, that he was deeply ashamed, that he was seeking professional help. He would paint himself as a flawed man who made a terrible mistake, not a monster. He called his personal lawyer. "I need you to find Lily," he ordered. "I need to talk to her. I'll give her anything she wants in the divorce, a blank check, but she needs to release a statement. Something about us working through a difficult time privately. Something to calm this down." He was still thinking in terms of transactions, of deals to be made. He believed everything and everyone had a price. He had bought Lily's compliance for years with a lifestyle she could never have afforded on her own. He assumed he could buy her silence now. He completely underestimated the change that had occurred in her. He couldn't grasp that the woman he had terrorized was no longer the woman he was trying to negotiate with. He spent the rest of the day holed up in his office, a fallen king in his glass castle, watching his empire crumble in real time on a dozen different screens. News anchors dissected his character. Pundits debated the psychology of domestic abuse. Celebrities tweeted their support for Lily. He was no longer Adam Whitaker, the titan of industry. He was a villain in a global drama, a meme, a hashtag. Late that afternoon, a statement was released. Not from Lily, but from a high-profile attorney known for representing victims of domestic violence. "I have been retained by Lily Whitaker," the statement read. "She is in a safe, undisclosed location. She is asking for privacy as she focuses on her health and the health of her unborn child. She will not be making any further comment at this time." The statement was a tactical masterstroke. It positioned Lily as a vulnerable victim under professional protection, and it completely shut down Adam's attempts to reach her. He couldn't control the narrative if the main character refused to speak her lines. He was truly alone now, abandoned by his business partners, his board, his mistress, and his wife. As dusk fell over Austin, casting long shadows across his opulent office, Adam Whitaker finally understood the terrifying, absolute nature of his ruin. He had built an empire of glass, and with one violent, thoughtless act, he had given the world the stone to shatter it. Maya Kerr watched the firestorm from the quiet, minimalist luxury of her downtown condo. Her phone was off. Her email was closed. She had a bottle of chilled Sancerre on the table and a live feed of a financial news network on her widescreen TV. The chyron at the bottom of the screen was a thing of beauty. Whittaker Enterprises stock plummets 40% amid CEO scandal. Every talking head was dissecting Adam's character, his company's toxic culture, his spectacular fall from grace. It was everything she had hoped for, and more. There was no guilt, no remorse. There was only the cold, satisfying hum of a meticulously executed plan coming to fruition. To the world, Maya was the ambitious, amoral mistress, a Lady Macbeth in a designer suit. They would assume her motive was jealousy, a spurned woman's revenge for being the other woman. That was the simple, easy narrative. The truth, as always, was far more complex. Maya's relationship with Adam had never been about love. It was about power. She was drawn to his, and she wanted it for herself. She had come from nothing. A scholarship kid who fought her way through law school with a ferocity that left her peers in the dust. She saw the world as a brutal, zero-sum game, and she had long ago decided she would be a player, not a pawn. When she joined Whittaker Enterprises, she saw Adam for what he was, a brilliant but deeply flawed man, a narcissist whose ego was both his greatest asset and his most profound vulnerability. She made herself indispensable to him, not just as a lawyer, but as a strategist and a confidant. She mirrored his ambition, validated his ruthlessness, and fed his ego. She became the person he turned to when the gentle and moral world of his wife, Lily, became too confining. Her affair with him was a strategic infiltration. She learned everything about his business, his enemies, his secrets. But she also learned about his darkness. She saw the flashes of his temper, the cruel way he spoke about his subordinates, the casual contempt he held for anyone he deemed lesser, which was almost everyone. She saw the way he treated Lily, the subtle and constant gaslighting, the emotional abuse designed to keep her small and dependent. Maya didn't feel pity for Lily, not at first. She saw her as weak, a willing participant in the gilded cage Adam had built. But then Lily got pregnant, and Maya saw Adam's reaction. He wasn't happy. He was inconvenienced. The baby was a complication, a threat to his freedom. He became more volatile, more controlling of Lily, his cruelty escalating. That's when Maya's plan began to form. It wasn't born of a sudden moral awakening. It was born of cold, hard calculation. She saw a unique opportunity. Adam's impending fatherhood was making him unstable. His abuse of Lily was escalating. It was only a matter of time before he did something unforgivable, and Maya decided she would be there to document it. Her motive was twofold. First, and most simply, it was self-preservation. She knew Adam would eventually discard her. She was a thrill, an escape. But he would never leave his wife, especially with a child on the way. His legacy was tied to the image of the perfect family. When he was done with her, he would cut her loose with a severance package and an NDA, and she would be just another footnote in his biography. She refused to let that happen. The video was her insurance policy, her golden parachute. But the second motive was deeper, more ambitious. It was a hostile takeover of her own. She didn't just want to escape Adam's orbit. She wanted to usurp it. For months, she had been quietly feeding information to one of Adam's biggest rivals, a competing private equity firm run by a woman named Veronica Ames. Ames was a shrewd, patient predator who had been looking for a crack in Adam's armor for years. Maya provided that crack. She fed Ames insider information about the Holloway deal, about Adam's business practices, about the morale within his company. The plan was simple. Maya would provide the catalyst for Adam's downfall, and in the ensuing chaos, Ames's firm would swoop in, buy up Whitaker Enterprises' distressed assets for pennies on the dollar, and essentially absorb his empire. Maya's price for this corporate espionage? A full partnership at Ames's firm and a percentage of the profits from the Whitaker takeover. It was a breathtakingly audacious move, a betrayal on a scale Adam himself would have admired had he not been the target. That night in the penthouse, she had known he was close to the edge. She had subtly provoked the confrontation, playing the part of the calm, confident mistress to fuel Lily's insecurity and Adam's rage. When she saw him pick up the glass, she knew this was the moment. She pressed record, her hand steady, her heart beating with the thrill of the hunt. Leaking the video was the final, critical step. She sent it to Lily first, a calculated move designed to give the victim a head start and legitimize the narrative. Then, using an untraceable server, she released it to the world. She was the architect of the storm, and she had built it perfectly. She took a sip of her wine, the cool liquid a counterpoint to the fire of her triumph. She knew the world would see her as a villain. Let them. They could never understand the intricate, multi-level game she had just played. And won. She had not only destroyed the man who thought he controlled her, but she had also secured her own future, a future of immense wealth and power. She had used Adam's own ruthlessness against him. She had seen the monster, and instead of running, she had learned how to feed it, how to aim it, and finally, how to slay it for her own gain. Maya Kerr was nobody's mistress. She was a queen, and this was her coronation. The first few days in the hotel were a blur of shock and white noise. Lily kept her phone off, unable to face the deluge of messages, the news alerts, the endless digital chorus of her own trauma. She felt like a ghost, haunting an anonymous room while a drama about her life played out on a global stage. The woman in the video, the Lily Whitaker everyone was talking about, felt like a stranger. That woman was a symbol, a victim, a headline. Lily was just a woman, pregnant and terrified, who had nowhere to go. Her sister Megan flew in from Seattle on the second day. The moment she walked into the hotel room and saw Lily's pale face and bandaged arm, she burst into tears, wrapping her in a fierce, protective hug. It was the first time Lily had allowed herself to truly break down. She sobbed into her sister's shoulder, all the fear and pain and humiliation pouring out of her in a raw, ragged flood. "I can't believe he did that," Megan whispered, her voice thick with rage. "I never liked him, Lily. I never trusted him." Lily had heard it before, the gentle warnings from her family and friends, the concerns she had brushed aside. She had been so caught up in the whirlwind of Adam's world, so dazzled by his charm and power, that she had explained away every red flag. The possessiveness, he was protective. The temper, he was passionate. The isolation from her old friends, he just wanted her all to himself. She had been complicit in the construction of her own cage. With Megan there, a small semblance of order began to emerge from the chaos. Megan fielded the calls, acted as a gatekeeper, and ordered takeout. Most importantly, she found Lily a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but Veronica Ames. The same Veronica Ames who ran the rival firm, but who also, through her foundation, funded a legal aid clinic for victims of domestic violence. Megan had found her through a women's support network online. It was a stroke of cosmic irony that the woman poised to destroy Adam's professional life would also be the one to help liberate his wife. The meeting with Veronica was a revelation. She was in her 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes, and an air of calm, unshakable competence. She wasn't warm and fuzzy. She was a force. She listened to Lily's story without interruption, her expression unreadable. When Lily finished, Veronica leaned forward. "Lily," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "Right now, you are in the eye of a media hurricane. Adam will try to use his money and power to paint you as unstable, a liar, or a gold digger. Our first job is to protect you and your story." The statement we released was the first step. The next steps are up to you. She laid out the options: a quiet divorce with a massive settlement and a strict NDA, or a public fight, using the video as leverage to not only secure her financial future, but to also ensure Adam faced real consequences. An NDA would mean you could never speak about what he did, Veronica explained. He would buy your silence, and in a year, he'd rebrand himself as a reformed man and carry on. Or you can refuse to be silenced. You can make sure your story is told in your own words. It will be harder. It will be painful. But it will mean he can never deny what he did. A few days ago, the thought of a public fight would have been terrifying. But something had shifted in Lily. The global outpouring of support, the thousands of messages from women who had survived similar situations, had awakened something in her. She was not alone. Her story was their story. "I don't want his hush money," Lily said, her voice gaining a strength she hadn't felt in years. "I want him to be held accountable. I don't want another woman to ever have to stand where I stood." Veronica Ames smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Good," she said. "That's the answer I was hoping for." In the weeks that followed, Lily began to find her voice. With Veronica's guidance, she started working with a therapist who specialized in trauma. She began to understand the cycle of narcissistic abuse, to put names to the tactics Adam had used against her for years: gaslighting, isolation, love bombing, devaluation. Each session was like peeling back a layer of her old life and seeing it for what it was, not a fairy tale, but a carefully managed prison. She also started reading the messages. Not the comments on news sites, but the direct messages sent to a new, private social media account Megan had set up for her. They were from women all over the world. "I believe you. Your courage gave me courage. I left him today because of you." She was no longer just Lily Whitaker, the victim in the viral video. She was becoming a symbol of survival. The voice that Adam had tried so hard to silence was now being amplified by millions. The power imbalance that had defined her marriage was being rewritten in real time. He had isolated her, but now she was part of a global sisterhood. One evening, a package arrived at the hotel. It was from Veronica Ames's office. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a preliminary offer from Adam's legal team. He was offering her full ownership of the penthouse, a one-time payment of $50 million, and a lifelong stipend, all in exchange for her signature on an ironclad NDA and a public statement supporting his journey of healing. A month ago, that number would have been unimaginable, a king's ransom. Now it looked like what it was, the price tag on her silence. Lily picked up her phone and called Veronica. "Tell them no," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Tell them I'll see them in court." She hung up and looked out the window at the city lights. They no longer looked cold and indifferent. They looked like a promise. The storm was still raging, but for the first time, Lily felt like she was the one directing the wind. The rejection of his $50 million offer was a declaration of war that Adam, in his diminished state, was not equipped to fight. He had believed, with the unshakable arrogance of the powerful, that money could solve any problem. The realization that Lily could not be bought sent him into a tailspin of fury and disbelief. He was hemorrhaging money, power, and respect, and the one person who could stop the bleeding had just refused to apply the tourniquet. The consequences of the viral video cascaded through his life with the brutal efficiency of a line of falling dominoes. The board of Whitaker Enterprises, under immense pressure from shareholders and the public, officially removed him as CEO. His name, once the company's greatest asset, was now its most toxic liability. They installed an interim CEO and began the process of rebranding, scrubbing his image from their website as if he had never existed. His own company had exiled him. His social life evaporated. The friends who had once clamored for invitations to his parties now crossed the street to avoid him. The charity boards he sat on issued public statements politely announcing his resignation. He was a pariah, a modern-day leper in a bespoke suit. Legally, he was besieged. Lily's lawyer, Veronica Ames, was a master strategist. She filed for divorce, citing cruelty and domestic violence, and immediately filed a motion to have Adam's assets frozen pending a full financial disclosure. Simultaneously, the Austin District Attorney's Office, spurred by the public outcry, announced they were opening a criminal investigation into the incident. The phrase aggravated assault was used. The possibility of jail time, once an absurd notion, was now a terrifyingly real prospect. But the most devastating front in this war was the one being waged by Veronica Ames on behalf of her other client, Ames Capital. With Whitaker Enterprises in disarray and its stock price at an all-time low, Ames launched a formal, hostile takeover bid. It was a brilliant, predatory move. She was using the chaos Maya had created to devour Adam's empire. Adam, isolated in his penthouse, now more a prison than a palace, watched it all unfold. He was surrounded by lawyers who billed by the hour and offered grim predictions. His only companion was the bottom of a whiskey bottle. The rage had curdled into a bitter, paranoid resentment. He was the victim here, he told himself. Betrayed by a treacherous mistress and an ungrateful wife, crucified by a world that didn't understand the pressures he was under. It was during a late-night, drunken spiral through the internet that he stumbled upon the truth about Maya. A small, independent financial blog published a heavily researched piece of investigative journalism. It detailed Maya's long-standing connections to Veronica Ames and laid out a compelling, evidence-backed timeline that suggested corporate espionage. It posited that Maya hadn't leaked the video out of passion or revenge, but as the final move in a long con designed to deliver Whitaker Enterprises into the hands of a rival. The article didn't go viral like the video had, but for Adam, it was a revelation. A cold, sober clarity cut through his drunken haze. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered by his wife, he had been systematically dismantled by his mistress. His affair wasn't just a personal failing, it was a catastrophic business error. He had let the enemy into his bed, into his boardroom, into his head. He had given her the secrets she needed to ruin him. The humiliation was absolute. Meanwhile, Lily was building a new life. She moved into a secure, comfortable home in a quiet neighborhood, paid for by a fund Veronica had established for her. She was surrounded by the fierce love of her family and a small, new circle of friends. Other women who had found their way to Veronica's foundation. She continued with her therapy, learning to set boundaries and reclaim her own sense of self-worth. She became an unwilling but powerful public figure. She agreed to one, carefully managed interview with a respected female journalist. She didn't cry or rage. She simply told her story, calmly and factually. She spoke about the years of emotional abuse, the slow erosion of her identity, and the terror of that final night. But she also spoke about the incredible wave of support she had received, and her newfound determination to use her platform to advocate for other victims. The interview was a masterclass in quiet strength. It solidified public opinion firmly on her side and made Adam's attempts to smear her look even more pathetic. The reckoning came to a head in a sterile conference room for a deposition in their divorce case. It was the first time Adam and Lily had been in the same room since that night. He was thinner, his face puffy, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame. He looked like a ghost of the man he once was. Lily, by contrast, seemed to radiate a calm, centered strength. Her pregnancy was now in its final weeks, and her maternal energy filled the room. Adam's lawyers tried to grill her, to poke holes in her story, to paint her as a vindictive spouse. But she never wavered. She answered every question with a quiet, unshakable dignity. At the end of the deposition, as they were packing up, Adam looked directly at Lily for the first time. His eyes were hollow, filled with a desperate, defeated plea. "Lily," he whispered, his voice raspy, "I'm sorry." Lily met his gaze. There was no hatred in her eyes, only a profound, sad finality. "I know, Adam," she said softly, "but sorry doesn't fix what you broke." She turned and walked out of the room, her hand resting on her belly, leaving him alone with the full weight of his consequences. The reckoning was not a single dramatic event. It was this: a quiet room, a broken man, and the unshakable knowledge that he had single-handedly authored his own destruction. The birth of Lily's son, Ethan, was a quiet, joyful event, a stark contrast to the turbulent chaos of the preceding months. Holding him in her arms for the first time, Lily felt a sense of peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. This tiny, perfect human was the reason she had found the strength to fight. He was her future, her hope, her redemption. The legal battles concluded not with a dramatic courtroom showdown, but with a series of quiet capitulations. Faced with the criminal charges and the irrefutable video evidence, Adam accepted a plea bargain. 2 years of probation, a court-mandated year-long batterers intervention program, a substantial fine, and hundreds of hours of community service. It wasn't prison, but the public humiliation and the mark on his permanent record were a form of life sentence for a man whose identity was built on perfection and power. The divorce settlement was finalized. Lily received a significant portion of what remained of Adam's fortune, but more importantly, she retained her voice. There was no NDA. Adam's last attempt to buy her silence failed. As part of the settlement, he was also forced to issue a public apology, drafted by Veronica Ames's team, in which he took full responsibility for his actions and admitted to a history of abusive behavior. And what of Maya Kerr, the architect of the storm? The investigative blog post about her corporate espionage had gained traction. Veronica Ames, in a move of cold-blooded pragmatism, publicly severed all ties with her. While there wasn't enough hard evidence for a criminal prosecution, Maya's reputation in the legal and financial world was destroyed. She was branded as a traitor, a corporate spy. The partnership and riches she had schemed for evaporated. In the end, she had played the game as ruthlessly as Adam, and like him, had been consumed by her own ambition. She vanished from the Austin social scene, a ghost of her own making. For Adam, the court-mandated therapy was the beginning of a long, painful journey into himself. Stripped of his wealth, his power, and his ego, he was forced to confront the empty, angry man he had become. He had to face the roots of his rage, his pathological need for control, his deep-seated misogyny. It was a brutal, humbling process. Redemption, he learned, wasn't about winning back his fortune or his reputation. It was about the grueling, day-by-day work of becoming a decent human being. He saw his son, Ethan, only during supervised visits, his interactions with Lily brief and mediated. He looked at the son he could have raised, the family he could have had, and was forced to live with the chasm between that life and the one he had created. Lily, meanwhile, flourished. She used her settlement not for a life of idle luxury, but to launch the Ethan Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing legal aid, housing, and counseling for victims of domestic abuse. She became a powerful advocate, her quiet strength and personal story inspiring thousands. She had transformed her personal pain into a public purpose. She had found that her voice, the one Adam had tried to silence, was her greatest strength. Her life was not a fairy tale. There were still days when the trauma of that night washed over her, when she mourned the man she thought she had married. But she was not defined by her scars. She was defined by her survival. About 2 years later, Lily was giving the keynote speech at a fundraiser for her foundation. She spoke with passion and eloquence about the insidious nature of emotional abuse and the importance of believing victims. As she concluded, the room rose to a standing ovation. In the back, unnoticed by the crowd, stood Adam. He was there as part of his community service, helping the catering staff. He looked older, his face lined with a sorrow that seemed permanent. He watched her on the stage, not with envy or resentment, but with a profound, aching regret. He saw not the woman he had tried to break, but the incredible person she had become, not in spite of him, but because she had found the strength to break free from him. He slipped out before she could see him. He knew he could never be a part of her world again. His path was a solitary one. But as he walked out into the cool night air, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't happiness, but it was a kind of peace. He had lost everything he thought he wanted, only to realize he had never understood what was truly valuable. Lily, on the other hand, had walked through fire and emerged not just intact, but forged into something stronger and more beautiful. The story had ended, and a new one, hers, had just begun. This story is a powerful reminder that the most dangerous prisons aren't made of steel bars, but of fear, control, and silence. Lily's harrowing journey from a private hell to a public platform for change shows the incredible resilience of the human spirit. It's a testament to the fact that even when the world is shattered, we have the power to rebuild, to find our voice, and to turn our deepest pain into our greatest purpose. Adam's fall from grace and Maya's self-inflicted exile underscore a vital truth. Power built on cruelty and betrayal is a house of cards, destined to collapse. If Lily's story of survival and empowerment resonated with you, please hit the like button to show your support. Share this video to spread the message of hope and accountability. And for more emotional, true-to-life stories that explore the depths of human conflict and courage, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.